Hey, good evening, Gwinnett County. Thank you all for joining our first 2026 Spring Meet the Candidate Forum for Georgia Supreme Court Justice. We have two fabulous candidates that are running for the Georgia State Supreme Court tonight that I will allow our moderator to introduce to you all tonight. But first, before we get into that, just a couple of quick announcements of some upcoming events that the organization has going on. Starting with for all our members, starting this Saturday from 10 a.m. to 12, all members are asked to register for the upcoming membership orientation that'll be on Saturday, April 18th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Should have already received an email from the secretary, but another one will be sent out again, probably in the next 24 to 48 hours for you to register. So please sign up, register for that membership orientation. Come get educated on your local branch here in Gwinnett County. Next upcoming event, we do have our general membership meeting, which will be on April the 21st at 7 p.m. It'll be fully virtual. Typically, you all know we meet at the Gwinnett Justice and Administration Center every second Thursday at 7 p.m. But due to spring break week last week, it was postponed to April 21st on Tuesday at 7 o'clock. Members can register to attend that event. For those of you who are not members, the public can watch the same way you're watching this stream, which is via Facebook or YouTube. Definitely come with questions. We're going to have the OSECO group on, which is going to provide an update on the big house out in the promised land, on where they are with that. I know that's a project that the Livesey family and the McGuire family have been working on for years, and it's finally starting to get some movement. And this is an opportunity for the public to weigh in on that project. So definitely go to that website. We've shared that with those of you who are members or part of our email list. So please look at that update or go to Gwinnett County and look up the Livesey McGuire or McGuire Livesey Big House project on the Gwinnett County website, and just get more informed on where they are in that project. But definitely come with some additional questions on next Tuesday, as we will have the SECO group who's leading that project, as well as members from the county that's working on that project to come and speak and answer any questions or concerns people have about the project. That's pretty much it. I think I covered all our pretty much announcements that we have for tonight. We're still asking members to contact the governor to say no to House Bill HB 369, which is a bill that's at his desk that will move all our county elections to nonpartisan, move those elections to May, where we know that there's a much lower voter turnout. So we asking people to contact the governor to vote no to that particular bill, simply because it disenfranchised majority of the voters, which are voted in November. And that leads us into tonight's candidate forum. For those of you who may not be aware, since judges are nonpartisan, the candidates that I'm about to introduce tonight, you can only vote for them in this May 19th election. Early voting will start for that election on Monday, April 27th. So we asking you to check your registration status at www.mvp.sos.ga.gov. Definitely take the time to go online to check your registration status. And at this time, I'll go ahead and won't belabor the time and bring in our moderator for tonight, our legal redress member, Attorney Karen Scott Green, who's going to be the moderator for tonight's candidate forum, and she will introduce our guest. I will say these two candidates are not running against each other. Attorney Green will talk about who their opponents are. We did invite all of the candidates that are running for Georgia State Supreme Court Justice for this May election. We only got a response from Attorney Rankin and Attorney Jordan, and I'll let Attorney Green introduce them at this time.
Thank you, President Paul. As President Paul stated, I am Karen Scott Green, a member of the Legal Redress Committee for the Gwinnett NAACP. And we're joined this evening by two of the 2026 Georgia Supreme Court election candidates, Jen Jordan and Miracle Rankin. Both Ms. Jordan and Ms. Rankin are challenging incumbents. Ms. Jordan is challenging presiding Justice Sarah Hawkins Warren, and Miracle Rankin is challenging incumbent Justice Charlie Bethel in this upcoming May 2026 election. Welcome, Ms. Attorney Rankin and Attorney Jordan.
Thank you. We're so excited to be here, really.
And we are excited to have you. And Ms. Jordan, can you tell us a little bit about yourself within 2 minutes? Give us an introduction of who you are and introduce yourself to the electorate.
Yeah, my name is Jen Jordan. I've been an attorney for 25 years and formerly a state senator out in representing large parts of Cobb County and Fulton County. And I served from 2017 till 22, and then I was the Democratic nominee for Attorney General in 22 and ran statewide at that point in time. I'm originally from South Georgia and grew up, in a household that was led by a single mother. She had a beauty shop, and I went there every day after school, and that's how I was raised, going there to help her. And what that really taught me was that everybody in a community really needs help at some point in time. And it really doesn't matter who you are or kind of if people perceive you as someone who's wealthy or has some kind of position in the community, bad things can happen whether or not you've done anything, to bring it on. And I think that's what led me to law school. So excited to be running for Supreme Court. It's so incredibly important for folks to understand the power that members of the Supreme Court have in terms of their everyday lives. And I know that Miracle and I are both on, we both think the same thing, that it's about time that the folks that are on the Supreme Court actually are serving the people of this state and not necessarily the politically connected or the powerful. So just really happy to be here with y'all. And I'll hand it over to Miracle right now.
Thank you. Miracle, can you give us an introduction?
And she may be having some issues
Are you
with
able
her
to?
audio.
Okay. While Miracle is reconnecting or connecting and figuring out her audio, I'm going to ask the first question of Attorney Jordan. How would you describe your judicial philosophy and how would it guide your interpretation of the Georgia Constitution?
So the way I think about my judicial philosophy, it really is about always making sure that you understand the impact on real people in terms of your decision making and really trying to focus on justice too. And in terms of the state constitution, I will say that I really subscribe to um, the judicial philosophy that former Chief Justice Harold Clark had, where basically he said, look, the federal constitution and the US Constitution are kind of the floor for rights. And that with respect to the state constitution, it's extra, right? So it's more. So for Georgians and for Georgia citizens, it's an automatic, we really do get more protections because that's really what the state constitution provides. And I know with respect to a lot of the stripping of protections and rights at the U.S. Supreme Court level with the federal Constitution, it has become so much more important and significant in terms of state Supreme Courts. And people that need to understand that we can't go to the federal courts anymore, or not as much as we used to, really, for them to protect our rights. These battles are really going to be fought in the state courts and in front of the appellate courts and specifically the Georgia Supreme Court when it comes to folks in Georgia.
Thank you for that. I think. Hi, Miracle, can you hear us?
Yes, can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Okay, are you able to give us an introduction? I was able to ask the first question of Attorney Jordan. We're going to go back to you and have you introduce yourself, and then I'll ask you your first question.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Miracle Rankin. My apologies. Something odd was going on with my audio when I got put over into the room, but I'm here and I'm happy to be here this evening. I am originally from Louisiana. I moved to Georgia when I was in high school. Went to high school in Decatur at Towers High School, Spelman College undergrad, UGA for law school. And I'm more of a Georgia peach than I am anything else. Georgia is my home. It's where I'm raising my family with my husband. I have two young children, and I've been practicing law for almost 2 decades. My practice includes representing individuals across our state who have been catastrophically injured due to trucking wrecks, medical negligence, traumatic brain injuries. Really bad injuries is typically what my clients' cases involve, or else wrongful death. I'm running for the Georgia Supreme Court because I believe right now we need some new voices and new leadership across our state, but in particular in our judicial system. Now more than ever, we're seeing that our judicial bench really isn't very balanced in thought and background. And it's really important that we have diverse perspectives on the bench because the court deals with issues that affect every Georgian across our state. And we have a very diverse state. So it's important that our court has representation that understands that as well.
And so, Attorney Rankin, you mentioned balance. How should a Georgia Supreme Court justice balance respect for precedent with the need to adapt to changing legal and societal conditions?
I think the court should always respect precedent. I mean, that generally should be a guiding principle of understanding and having a respect for the precedent that has come before the court. But there also has to be the balance with the court of understanding, to your point, that times are changing and that we are living in a new day and age, be it technology, advancements, or the like. And so, with that, you have to kind of strike the balance between precedent while also dealing with what our current times are and making sure that at the end of the day, we have a full respect for the Constitution and the protections that it also provides.
Okay. And given some of the headlines that we've had in the recent years, this question is for Attorney Jordan. What does judicial independence mean to you, especially when there may be political pressure from elected officials or public opinion?
Yeah, I think it's doing what's right even when it's hard, right? Even if you are the political powers that be are putting um, any kind of stress on you. I think at the end of the day, that is really what judicial independence is, which is that you kind of stand separate from the legislative branch, the executive branch, and that really you are um, kind of the last line of defense, if you will, when it comes to anybody. And when I say anybody, really what I mean is government overreach, right? I mean, and in particular, what I'm thinking about right now is the fact that we've got the federal government and people at the federal government that are trying to overtake our state elections. We have a U.S. Supreme Court who continues to overturn precedent in ways that hurt people in our state. And it's one of those things where, the folks that sit on our court, um, should be separate and independent from that and make a decision as to what our state constitution means, um, and really how it can be used to protect the people here and protect whether it's our elections, whether it's our rights, um, however that kind of comes into play in the next few years, that really we are willing to stand up to whomever it is that are going to try to come and do things that they are not supposed to do, that run afoul of our state constitution.
Attorney Rankin, similarly, in your view, how can state courts serve as a check within the system of government while remaining within their constitutional role?
I agree with what Attorney Jordan has said, that the Supreme Court of Georgia is the last line of defense for our state. And understanding there are three branches of government that are separate, it's important the role and the weight that judges carry, which is to, get it right and to make sure that they are protecting every Georgian in the decisions that they're making. And so judicial independence is extremely important, and not having those outside pressures being leveled on you while you're trying to make very important decisions, because you understand the wide sweeping effect that they have for individuals across our state.
Thank you. And Attorney Jordan, what guiding principles should courts follow when reviewing laws or policies that impact access to voting rights?
I mean, I think the most important thing is always to have, the state constitution and state the fundamental rights, you know, always front and center. Because if you think about it, in terms of all the other rights that we have, right, they're all really they all kind of spring from voting rights, right? Because if we can't vote to choose who represents us, if we can't vote, um, just in terms of our individual kind of choices and be fully active or present kind of in our political ecosystem, then nothing else really matters, right? It all comes from voting. And so that's why voting, when you think about it, we should always be trying to make voting easier for people, more accessible. And this is really a personal view and how I approached it when I was a state senator. I want to make it where it is easy for people who are legally able to vote to be able to cast a vote. And whether that means more Saturday voting, more early voting, no excuse absentee ballots, whatever it is, because we should be making it easier for people to fully participate in our democracy and not harder. And I think kind of that belief will go with me onto the Supreme Court, where I really do think that is kind of the core of kind of our civic duty. And so, always wanting to protect the franchise, because so many people have died to protect it in this country.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Attorney Rankin, this is a very similar question to the one I just asked Attorney Jordan. How can the judiciary help ensure both election integrity and public confidence in the electoral process?
So I'll start by saying, to the extent that our voting rights access may actually become something that is an issue before the court, I can't specifically speak to that. It could be determined as prejudging, but I can tell you what I personally believe from that perspective as it pertains to access to the vote and the right to vote. Um, as I've been on this campaign trail and talking to people, younger folks in particular are always like, well, does our vote matter? Does it count? And one of the things that I keep harping is that, yes, every vote matters and every vote counts. We've had a storied history in the women's right to vote, minorities' right to vote, and the various fights that had to be enacted in order to be able to have the opportunity to even vote. And that's a very sacred right that I believe is one that should be protected, and that the courts should be able to act independently in making sure that they protect that fundamental right of access to the ballot. It should not be made harder for people to have access to the ballot. I don't believe that there should be barriers put in place unduly to allow people to have access to the ballot. My personal beliefs are that if you are legally able to vote and allowed to vote, that you should have every opportunity to do so, and that the state should make it more accessible to you and not make it harder.
Okay. And this is a question for both of you. I'm going to let Attorney Jordan answer it first. Would you consider yourself to be a strict constructionist, or do you believe that the Constitution is such, and we'll relate it to the Georgia Constitution, is such that it is a living, breathing document that evolves over time?
So I am not a strict constructionist, because you really can't be, right? And I'll tell you that what's different about Georgia versus the US Constitution is that we have actually amended our Constitution many, many, many times since our very first Constitution in the 1700s. So, they always talk about at the federal level, what did the founding fathers mean by these words? Or what does this mean in the context of the 1700s? Well, that's not at play from my perspective here in Georgia. The last time that the voters state, and let's be clear, the voters ratified our Constitution, a whole new Constitution, was in 1982. And it is the 1983 Constitution. And in particular, if you look at the notes in terms of the Constitutional Committee that was drafting that Constitution, they actually made it shorter and used less words. And the whole point of that was to say we do not want to be restricted. If we put more words in it, then we're going to be more restricted. We need to have a document, a modern document, that is going to be able to withstand scrutiny and also be able to kind of deal with issues and kind of things that come up that we have no idea sitting here are going to even come up in the future. And so really our state constitution absolutely is kind of a living document that is supposed to kind of bend and be used in a way to deal with issues that in 1982 no one could have ever have foreseen coming. And I think about AI and Waymo, the cars that drive themselves. I mean, there is just no way that the folks that were drafting that constitution could have ever foreseen any of those issues coming up. So not a strict constructionist at all, but definitely believe in the right of our people in this state to amend the Constitution as they see fit.
And same question for you, Attorney Rankin.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not a strict constructionist either. I believe that it is a living, breathing document, and that it is there essentially to provide as many protections to the citizens of our state as possible. But you have to have justices who are willing to read it as such and willing to give it its broad application and the protections that it affords.
Okay. And this is a question for both candidates. Attorney Rankin, since you are still on screen, I'll ask the question to you. How should courts ensure fairness and impartiality for all individuals, regardless of their backgrounds or resources?
Well, I think one great way to ensure fairness is to have a bench that's diverse and that has varying backgrounds, be it professionally as well as personally, that you bring to the court, because everyone brings their own beliefs to the court. As justices, you are to set those aside, but they are somewhat the fabric that makes up the character of your life. What may be reasonable to a 60-year-old white man may not be reasonable to a 16-year-old young Black guy. So it's important to have individuals on the court who bring diversity and balance to the bench. You can't all be leaning conservative or liberal. You need to have a bench that is well balanced in order to ensure that we have that fairness that is applied to the litigants that come from the court.
Okay. Same question for you, Attorney Jordan.
Yeah, I completely agree with Miracle. I think for so long, one of the biggest problems that we've had is the complete lack of diversity. And, that really does impact decision making. And while there have been some strides, obviously we are nowhere near where we need to be. I mean, our courts really should reflect the people of this state, and they do not. Absolutely do not. And so 100% with respect to what Miracle said, I will say that I do think at the Georgia Supreme Court level that, we really play a role in terms of the leadership that we provide throughout the court system in terms of making the court accessible to everyone, right? Really making sure that the processes are transparent and that that anyone can access them if they want to. And really trying to educate people too. I mean, I know that's how I felt when I was in the state Senate, that a lot of people didn't understand how to make government work for them. And when you don't know how to to make it work for you, it becomes very frustrating, right? And so I think that it's imperative for the judiciary in this state to really be an active participant in terms of educating and listening too, right? If something's not working for people, if people aren't able to access the courts in a way that's meaningful, then something's wrong, and something needs to be done about that. So I think we just need to be much more intentional in terms of how we approach just making sure that the courts work for everybody and not just the few um, who may can afford justice, right? And that's what people always say, that justice, you can buy it. And unfortunately, I think we've seen that that can happen, and it shouldn't. It really shouldn't.
Okay, thank you. Uh, and I'm going to ask this question of you since you're on the screen, Attorney Jordan. What ethical standards should guide a Supreme Court justice, and how should the public hold the judiciary accountable?
You know, I think that every look, I think it should be at the highest levels, right? Like, because in terms of the judiciary, it isn't just a matter of um, real conflicts, right? Like real legal conflicts. It is about things that may undermine people's belief that the system is legitimate. And it is so incredibly important that people believe that our judicial system is legitimate and that it will um, mete out justice fairly, no matter who you are. And I think that we have not seen that, right? We have seen really, I don't even want to say there are two different justice systems. It feels like
Mm,
there are several different justice systems, right? Depending on, who you know, who your daddy is, how much money you have, you know, what politician you know. I mean, we've literally got at the highest levels in terms of the president of the United States, someone who is having people pay for pardons, right? Like if you give my campaign enough, or if you give me enough money, I'm going to issue you a pardon. I mean, that that is incredibly problematic, because it shouldn't be like that. And so for individuals that are in the judiciary, that obviously it should be at the highest level. But even in terms of the own rules, because the ethical rules are not that tight, in terms of around even like investments or anything like that. I think that we really need to revisit a lot of that stuff, because at the end of the day, even if it's not a real legal conflict per se, if it really undermines people's confidence in the judiciary, then it's something that we really need to deal with.
one of the things that as attorneys that was always drilled into us from ethics class is we have to avoid even the appearance of impropriety.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I wholeheartedly agree with you. Same question for you, Miracle. I will, Attorney Rankin, I will give it again. What ethical standards should guide a Supreme Court justice, and how should the public hold the judiciary accountable?
I was going to start with the appearance of impropriety. So you you took that part, but I definitely believe that that's like the beginning guiding principle, right? If it doesn't seem right or if it doesn't look right, then there may be something there for you to question, and you shouldn't be able to, or as a person before the court, you shouldn't be questioning if the court's going to give you a fair shake or a fair opportunity, because they're bending one way to the left or to the right in favor of someone else, due to own personal gains that the court may have. I definitely believe in the old saying that, integrity is doing what's right when nobody is watching, right? And that's what ethics means to me from a judicial perspective, that it may not be the most favorable, like the popular opinion for what your actions are, but it's the right thing to do. And that may include that it ruffles some feathers and it may not please everyone, but as long as your ethical standards remain high and you don't allow outside pressures to influence you and your decision making, then I think that continues to build the public's trust. Also, as long as the decisions that are made by courts are rooted in making sure that the Constitution is fairly applied to everyone who comes before it, I also believe that that helps build the public confidence and trust that we see in our court system. So, to Jen's point, there have been a lot of things going on nationally that has really rocked people's ability to trust what's going on from a leadership perspective. However, it's like anything. You have to start with building blocks and build that trust back up, one decision, one opportunity at a time. And one of the things we were talking about earlier was that things that are important when coming before the court in order to build that faith and that trust with individuals who are before them. I think listening is important. Far too often, we all know what a hot bench feels like, right? But I've seen benches where it feels like the courts are advocating for the positions of one side or the other instead of being an actual listening court and listening to the individuals that are before the court putting forth their cases. So one of the things that is really important to me in being before appellate courts is knowing that the court is actually listening to my position, that they haven't come in with any prejudged ideas or notions about it, but they're keeping an open mind and that they're willing to fairly apply the law as well as the Constitution.
Very good. Thank you. And my next question, I'm going to shift over to criminal justice because you both will hear when you're on the Supreme Court, you'll hear a variety of cases, and criminal justice will be one of them, will be one aspect. So for Attorney Rankin, how should courts balance public safety with the defendant's constitutional rights?
I think the court should always look to the Constitution as its guiding principle of ensuring that the defendant's rights are protected under the Constitution, but also ensuring public safety and public trust. It's a very delicate balance that courts have to strike, but I believe if the Constitution is the guiding principle, then they're able to do so much more efficiently and fairly across the board.
Okay. And same question for you, Attorney Jordan.
Yeah, I think it's delicate. And of course, like Attorney Rankin had said earlier, it's hard sometimes to talk about these or to answer these questions because you don't want to go too far in terms of so that you run afoul of the judicial canons. Look, I think that first and foremost, we always have to consider the constitutional rights of the person who is the accused. It just the power of the state is just too immense, and taking away someone's liberty is I mean that is the most significant power that the state has. And so with respect to that, then obviously the Constitution needs to be respected, rules of evidence need to be respected, and we need to make sure that whenever someone is prosecuted, that that the prosecution actually does meet its constitutional burden, because the consequences as for that one individual are pretty significant. But of course, there's always a balance, but you always have to center the constitutional rights of the accused.
Thank you. And as a follow-up to that, this question is for both of you, and I'll start with Attorney Jordan. What are your views, or do you believe that there are sentence disparities in Georgia in sentencing?
It's one of these things that I do think there are, and I think a lot of it, when I was talking about buying justice too, I have seen cases where if you have a good lawyer, right, you can get a good plea deal, or you can get off altogether. Maybe the DA decides not to prosecute because you have the money to pay for the experts and everything to come in, while someone who doesn't have the means really gets the book thrown at them, and they're given a plea deal where they're like, well, I mean, I didn't do this, but I don't have the ability to really fight this. And if I'm actually convicted, that means life in prison versus taking a plea, which is, which is much less. So yes, absolutely, there are sentencing disparities, and I think that that is a real problem, kind of across the board in this state, and is something that whether you're a lawyer or whether you're on the bench or whether you're just a citizen, you need to be aware of, because it really is something that we all need to be focused on.
Thank you. Same question for you, Attorney Rankin. Your
Yeah,
views on sentencing disparities?
yes, absolutely. I definitely believe that there are sentencing disparities. A lot of times we unfortunately see it as it involves race, as well as geography and certain aspects of the state, and the type of crime or the sentence that is being rendered. And it's an issue. I do believe it is something that needs to be addressed at a higher level, and to the extent that courts can address it, I believe that it should be done.
Okay, thank you. Now, for both of you, what experiences have most prepared you to serve on the Georgia Supreme Court? And I'm going to start with Attorney Jordan.
I think it's just representing everyday people. Um, for 25 years, I have represented individuals at the lowest points in their life, um, and have had to walk them through the legal system and explain when things weren't fair, and still keep fighting. But I also think that my experience as a state senator, where I actually drafted laws and kind of saw how that process worked on the other side, um, is really significant in terms of informing, um, kind of the larger knowledge base that I have, like in terms of what really happens, like when these laws get passed, and I think for one thing, I think it impacts really kind of the deference that I would normally have for a legislative body a lot of times, because I've seen some real shenanigans, and have also seen people act with real malicious intent and malice, um, you know, when they have been pushing certain legislation because they wanted to hurt certain folks in this state, and
Mhm.
that's not right. So I think it's kind of the full breadth of my career, fighting for individuals, not the powerful, in court, but then also representing those same individuals in the state senate, and in trying to fight against those very same efforts to try to strip them of their rights.
Okay. Same question for you, Attorney Rankin. What experiences have most prepared you to serve on the Georgia Supreme Court?
My practice of representing individuals across our state, I represent folks in some of the hardest times of their lives. I sit at their kitchen tables with them when, I'm wiping their tears over the loss of their child. And being able to have that level of empathy and trying to understand what they're going through when they are looking at me and saying, will anyone listen to me? Will someone take my case seriously? And having the opportunity to be their voice when they feel very voiceless and feel very powerless. A lot of people don't understand the intricacies of the judicial system until they get personally involved in it. And once they're involved in the system, it can feel very overwhelming. And so being able to be that body person for them, their protection, and navigate them through their case at the highest level has allowed me to be able to understand what's going on across our state. I represent clients all the way from Valdosta to Nashville and everywhere in between, Albany, Atlanta. I have a very vast practice. And I think that's also important because I have the ability to connect with people from various backgrounds, because I have a very interwoven background myself. I don't come from a family that had essentially a silver spoon. I've worked for everything that I've had to accomplish in life. And so I connect with people on various levels. I know what it feels like to be the employee working at the grocery store. and feeling like no one is listening to you or hearing you, or being the college student that's trying to figure out how to put your way through college while also working a full-time job and being a full-time student. And then just getting into your profession and working hard there and fighting back with when cancer strikes. So I have a very interwoven story of my life that I also believe allows me to connect with people across our state, to see them and to understand what they're going through. And I think that that's really important, with justices that are before the court, that they're also human and that they have that level of empathy that they bring with them to cases and understanding of what Georgians are actually experiencing. I've also have appellate experience in my career practicing law at the highest level doing catastrophic injury law. I've been before the appellate courts of Georgia. I've briefed cases before them. And so having that experience and knowing what it feels like to actually practice in the court is also very important as well.
Thank you. What is one value, Attorney Rankin, that you'll bring to the Georgia Supreme Court that voters should remember?
One value that I will bring is ensuring that I remain humble and accessible. Um, Far too often we see people who get robes and they get what some call robitis.
Robitis.
Yeah, where they get on the court and then they forget about the very people that they asked to put them there. And that's something that I just won't do. I'm a past president of the Georgia Association of Black Women Attorneys. And in my work there, I saw representing, the organization across the state, just how beautiful Georgia is and how important it is to still be of your community and of the communities of our state. So one of the things that I will bring from a value perspective is humility and accessibility. But that also means humility to the law. I think you have to be wise enough to know that you don't know everything, but be a hard enough worker that you'll figure it out. And so humility and hard work are some of my core values that I brought throughout my life and what has made me as successful as I am today. So I'll definitely bring that to the court.
Thank you. And Attorney Jordan, same question for you. The one value that you bring to the Georgia Supreme Court that voters should remember?
I think it is humility. I think it's empathy. I think it's all woven together in some ways. It really is about remembering where you come from and why you're there, right? So, um, like Miracle, I've had to work for everything that I have ever done in my life, and I get it, and I understand where people, um, are coming from. And I think that is so incredibly important. The power that is given to Supreme Court justices to hear some of the most complex, difficult issues. But you really have to kind of remember who you are, where you come from, and why you're there. And why I would be there is because it really is about the people of this state and always putting them first and working as hard as I possibly could to make sure that they were protected every day. And and I think that's important, and I think that's something we don't necessarily have right now.
All right. Thank you so much. I understand that we have a question in the chat. How should courts approach cases where there is an imbalance of power between the state and an individual? I'm going to ask Attorney Rankin to take that one first, and then we'll open it up to Attorney Jordan.
I think that the court should always approach the cases with the desire to get it right, and to follow the Constitution and the laws of the state of Georgia. If there is an imbalance of power between the state and a person, I think that the court should acknowledge that and look at it from the perspective of what does the Constitution say. Is there a way to balance that out? And if there is, they should be working towards figuring out how to do so.
Thank you. Same question for you, Attorney Jordan.
Yeah, I think I'm going to lean more into what some cases that I've actually done. in terms of the approach that I've taken there as an attorney representing the individual who did not have the power against the state. I think, for example, I have litigated cases against the Georgia Department of Corrections, and one of the biggest issues we've always had with them is that they don't seem to think that they are subject to the rules, right? That they don't have to hand over discovery, that they don't have to um, actually respond in a way that any other litigant would have to. And so I think it is so incredibly important that, especially when you have an imbalance of power, that the courts are there to make sure that the powerful interest is going to be held to the same rules and the same standards as anybody else.
So thank you. It's very good. And so for our closing arguments, unless we had any other questions in the chat. Okay, so for closing arguments, and since Attorney Jordan, you're on the screen, I'll let you go first. Why should Georgians trust you with the responsibility of being on the Georgia Supreme Court?
So I think I like to use the phrase that past is prologue, right? It's what people have done in their past can really give you an insight into who they are and what they'll do. And in terms of my career over the past 25 years, I have always represented individuals, when they've needed it most. I've gone after payday lenders when they were, really doing everything they could to hurt consumers and charging them 1,000% interest. Um, I've gone after the state of Georgia. I have sued the state of Georgia a number of times. In particular, I even sued Governor Kemp when he released the voter data of every single registered voter in the state in 2017. And went after the state of Georgia when they first wanted to do the voter IDs, which was going to enfranchise so many of our elderly in this state who didn't even have access to their birth certificates because they were born at home. So it's one of these things that my entire career, in terms of the people that I've represented, in really pushing back against the powerful and those who have taken advantage of people in this state, really is a testament to the kind of justice that I would be on the Georgia Supreme Court, which is really about centering individuals at all points in time, making sure that there isn't government overreach, and that where there is government overreach, that the court steps in and does something about it.
Thank you. Same question for you, Attorney Rankin. Why should Georgia voters trust you with the responsibility of sitting on the Georgia Supreme Court?
Sitting on the Georgia Supreme Court is a huge responsibility. And I believe it takes justices who understand what it means to serve the people of this state. And I should be trusted because that's what I've been doing. I've been serving the people of this state at some capacity since I've been of working age, be it as a lawyer in my current practice of representing individuals who've been catastrophically injured and being their voice. That's something that I take very much so to heart. There's a case that I had where multiple lawyers actually turned down the case and said that they would not take it because they just didn't believe that the person who died, that his life had much value because of his socioeconomic background. But when the clients came to me, I saw it differently. I saw him. I think it's important that individuals who serve at the highest level see the people that they're serving. And so because I saw him and I saw that everybody has life, has value to their life, and everyone deserves to, have dignity in their last days, I fought hard in that case. And I received a very large award for that family that was life and legacy changing. And I think that's important for the justices that serve on our court. We need individuals who are willing to be fighters for the people of our state, who are willing to stand up to powerful interests or special interests that are trying to advance their own agendas, but who are willing to stand up for the citizens of Georgia and to ensure that the protections of our Constitution are applied fairly across the board to everyone. And that's who I am. I'm a fighter. My name's Miracle because I fought to just get here into this world. As a young woman, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I fought to remain active in my practice and to have a family. And I fight every day in my career for my clients. And that's something that I would love to bring to the Supreme Court of Georgia, is to fight for the individuals across our state.
Thank you both, Attorney Rankin and Attorney Jordan. Thank you for joining us, and to everyone who is listening, who is out there. Forums like these are essential to an informed and engaged public. We encourage you to continue learning about these candidates. You can learn more about Miracle Rankin at miracleforgeorgia.com and Attorney Jen at jenforgeorgia.com. We encourage you to continue to learn more and to make your voices heard where it matters at the polls. And do not forget that judicial elections are in May, not in November. So if you do not vote in May, you have missed out on the opportunity to shift the Georgia Supreme Court.
All right. Thank you again to our guests, Attorney Jen Jordan, Attorney Miracle Rankin. Good luck on the campaign trail. Again, this is a statewide election. And also, before I go down that road, thank you to our moderator and legal redress member, Attorney Karen Scott Green. Just want to remind voters, this is a statewide election. So I know we, the Gwinnett NAACP, but this election is statewide. So if you're watching this and you're outside of Gwinnett County, you can vote in this election. This is a statewide election for the Georgia State Supreme Court. And just want to remind people how important these state Supreme Court decisions are. These courts decide on things like voting rights. They decide on things like, sometimes they get cases where they determine whether, somebody's going to be murdered by the state and whether that person's guilty or innocent. So again, the courts is what saved us in the 60s. A lot of those court cases, civil rights cases, went to the courts, and the courts, kept those laws on the books or even overturned some laws that they felt that it was unconstitutional. So voting for your judicial elections, especially for states, for the Supreme Court, state Supreme Court, is vitally important, especially when we got a hostile federal Supreme Court. You're going to want some allies on the state Supreme Court that's going to uphold both the state constitution and the federal constitution when we got a federal bench right now that seems to just be challenging everything and going against the grain on everything, from whether you're born in this country, you being a citizen, to trying to change the voting laws. We've already seen what happened with Roe versus Wade. So you're going to want some allies on the state Supreme Court. So, learn about the other candidates that are on the ballot, the incumbents. Fortunately, they were not able to make it tonight, but they did get the invite, but, chose not to attend. But also take with you, learn from these candidates tonight. We provided their website. Please learn more about them on their page. And I want to thank everybody again for joining us. Just a quick couple of announcements before we end tonight's program. Our general monthly meeting, as I stated, typically is on every second Thursday at the Gwinnett Justice and Administration Center. That has been moved to a virtual platform, fully virtual, on April 21st at 7 o'clock. So just come back here. We'll be here to provide some updates on the organization, some additional upcoming events, because we do got more candidate forums to come, some in-person candidate forums, some more fully virtual ones on the Superior Court that's coming up on April 28th. We got some other candidate forums on May 5th, which is going to be on the governor's race for the primary election for both the Democrat and Republican Party. We've invited all of those candidates to come out and state their case of why they should represent the Democrat or Republican Party for governor. So that candidate forum will be on May 5th, starting at 6 p.m. You can come out to Hopewell Baptist Church in Norcross. So please join us there at the Faith Hall. We've already posted the flyer all over Instagram and social media. For those of you who, I see some comments, somebody said they missed the candidate. Is there a replay? Absolutely. If you're watching on YouTube, Miss Diane, just hit the rewind button, take the little ticker at the bottom and push it backwards, and it'll rewind you to the top And you can rewatch the entire broadcast for those of you who may have missed it. Same on Facebook. There should be like a little line. You can just push it back and rewatch, or come out of Facebook after the program ends and come to go back into it, and you can watch it. Same with YouTube. But thank you all again for joining us. Again, thank you to all of the candidates that came out tonight, Attorney Rankin, Attorney Jordan. Thank you again, Karen Scott Green. And again, y'all be safe out here. I'm not going to only shout out Gwinnett like I typically do. I'm going to say be safe in these Georgia streets. And I see y'all these Georgia streets, as this is a statewide program. And so be safe in these Georgia streets, and y'all have a good rest of your night. Thank y'all again for joining us. Again, if you're a member of our organization for the local branch, please be reminded, check your emails, secretary@GwinnettNAACP.com for emails about registering for the upcoming membership orientation, which will be on Saturday from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. And somebody told me to remind y'all, we've been streaming it all night. The voter registration deadline is April the 20th. Thank you, Lord. So if you are not registered to vote, please go ahead and get that done so you can be able to vote in this year's May 19th election. We've already kind of put out there the early voting times, and I'll put that on the screen again. Election day is May 19th, but as I always say, bank your vote, because a lot can happen on the election day. Early voting is from April 27th, Monday, to May 15th, Friday. So you have 2 weeks of early voting, with 2 weekend voting taking place on May 2nd and May 9th weekends if you live in Gwinnett County. As always, depending on where you live in Georgia, check www.mvp.sos.ga.gov for your early voting precincts, as well as the times in your particular county. Again, www.mvp.sos.ga.gov. Also check your status. A lot of people getting kicked off the voter roll. We had over 500,000 people got kicked off the voter rolls last year in Georgia. Check your status. If you've been kicked off the voter roll, you need to re-register. Get it done. You got about a little less than a week, 6 days to get that done to be able to vote. As Attorney Green has already stated, judicial elections for your judges, they will not be on the ballot in November. You get one shot to get them elected, and that's in this upcoming May 19th election. Early voting opens April 27th. Don't wait. Make a plan. Go vote. Again, early voting, you can vote at any of the early voting precincts. You don't have to go to a certain precinct, so please take advantage of that. Again, y'all have a great rest of your night, and thank y'all again for joining us, and we'll see y'all in these Georgia streets. Thank you.
Bye.